We'll move on to the core main event now, and it is for the UFC Featherweight title. And it's two guys who faced each other twice already. It's Alex Volkanovski, our reigning champion, who is taking on the number one seed Max Holloway. Betting odds for this one, you can get Max Holloway at plus 155. Volkanovski, the bookmaker's favourite, minus 180. Now, as mentioned before, it's the third fight between the two. They first competed at UFC 245 and then again at UFC 251. Alex Volkanovski winning both of those matches. Interestingly, none of their fights have ever main evented a UFC pay-per-view, which I find quite quirky. I'm going to start off by asking, do you agree with this third fight? Because I'm in a bit of a bind when it comes to this. And I want to stress to Max Holloway fans, this is no sort of jab against him. I personally like the guy, and I think he's a fantastic fighter. But at the same time, have you ever seen that episode of The Simpsons where Bart's playing in the championship baseball game and he screws up the game-winning catch, but they keep replaying the game over and over until he gets it right? That's kind of how I feel with Max getting this third match. Like, Max has certainly shown with his performances against Yair and especially against Calvin Kattar, he's a step above the rest of the field when it comes to featherweight. But I get the impression that if the boot was on the other foot and Max Holloway was 2-0 up against Volkanovski, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Volkanovski would be nowhere near a third shot at the title.
I think so. I think if you just change the names on the scorecards, because I know, except for the first fight. First fight, I thought it was a clear Volk win. Second one's close, and I think you can go either way. I score Volk still, but I understand the Max one. If it went that way, there would be no third fight. And I think Volkanovski himself said, like, are we just going to keep giving him rematches until he wins?
That's the same sort of like concern I have as well. Like, and again, it's no disrespect to Max Holloway, who's a fantastic fighter.
The real number two. It's those two. They're the top of the mountain, and so part of me goes, yeah, keep giving them shots, but you know,
it's an awkward one, and I also sort of have this fear that if Max was to win this fight, the UFC was sort of retcon to make it seem as if he won the trilogy.
They're going to. I think that's an unconfirmed fact at this point. Is if he wins in any way, shape, or form, the UFC is going to go. And his incredibly controversial loss that he definitely won in the second fight, they're going to say it's 2-1 favor of Max when it isn't.
Let's talk about some of the combatants in more detail here. We'll start with Alex Volkanovski, 24-1 record, unbeaten in the UFC. He only has one loss on his portfolio, but that came in his fourth ever pro fight, and that took place at welterweight. So, when Alex Volkanovski first came into the UFC, there wasn't really all that much fanfare. He's just sort of like your quintessential wrestle brawler. A bit of a novelty coming from the fact that he had the rugby background. He was from Australia, which wasn't really back in those days. Australia wasn't really a big powerhouse when it came to MMA. It certainly is now with like CKB doing so well. But then he goes on this run, and it starts really with the Darren Elkins fight, and then he beats Chad Mendes, and then it's Jose Aldo, 2 wins over Max Holloway, Korean Zombie, Brian Ortega. So he's racking up a who's who of top featherweight fighters here.
He looks incredible right now. My first fight I watched of him was the Chad Mendes one, and then whenever he got the title shot, I was like, okay, I want to see his whole run. And he looks insane. His improvements in every fight looks like leaps and bounds. I think the least amount of improvement I've ever seen was between Max 1 and 2. And I think he still made improvements. Max just made more in between fights. But he is looking like, in terms of pure ability, the number 1 pound-for-pound guy on the planet right now, I think.
And I think there's certainly a big argument for that. I mean, I know a lot of people are saying like Kamaru Usman, Charles Oliveira's getting a lot of love, bearing in mind who he's been beaten recently. I'm same with you. I think Volkanovski, in my personal opinion, gets that vote. If there's some things that sort of stood out for me when it comes to Volkanovski is a lot of his name very early on was that sort of wrestle brawling style. Like, I make this joke with him and Chad Mendes because they look quite similar as well. It was two clones fighting each other. And he did fight a lot like Chad Mendes very early on in his run. Recently, though, we've seen him sort of start to abandon the wrestling side of the game, and he's doing the work with his hands. And we saw that with the Korean Zombie. Now, it must be stressed, Zombie was a last-minute replacement for Max Holloway, ironically enough. And Alex made that look easy. Much easier than I thought it was going to be.
I thought it'd be a little competitive, and then Volk would,
Yes.
Alex would pull away. No, it was a 10-8 basically every round. That was like, in a sense, you could argue the like Calvin Kattar, Max Holloway performance for Volkanovski. It's like they both had performance that was like, going into this, which tells a good story, I guess.
So we are talking about an Alex Volkanovski who is 2-0 up against Max Holloway. Looking at the first fight and then the second fight, what do you think were the big keys to Volk's victory, firstly at 245 and then again at 251? What did Max do to sort of neutralise some of Volk's offence from the first fight? What could we potentially see this time around?
I thought the big thing he did was he was ready for the switches because Volkanovski is incredible at pressing forward with an attack and with either a low kick to open it up and then switching stances mid-combination. And he was kind of ready for it, and he was making smart adjustments like timing an uppercut as the switch would come in, while he also was retreating and switching his own stance. Or when they were at range, and he does have the reach advantage, he would look low and then kick high and create a lot of awkward moments with kicks and like the open field. I think it was doing really well, and then Volkanovski had to kind of adjust back to it mid-fight, which is even harder to try and come back because it was kind of a comeback for him. Because I thought Max won the first 2 rounds, if I remember correctly.
Volk's rally in those 4th and 5th rounds was very impressive to me because we've always known that Max Holloway, for how good his conditioning is, the fact that he can get even stronger as you get into the 4th and 5th rounds because he's done such a good job keeping up that pace. Volk was able to do that, and Volk looked the fresher fighter by the end of the 5th round. He was the one coming forward and landing the big shots, and Max was a little bit, I'm a bit not sure what to do here now.
Definitely, Volk kind of slowed him down, which was
Yes.
impressive, And it might have been the big slam he had. I think it was in the 4th round. I know in the 5th round he got one, but I think he had one as well in the 4th round. But something kind of, slowed down Max just completely. Like he started kind of neutralizing once again, like he did in the first fight. Because I thought he neutralized him in the first fight, and he started kind of doing it near the end.
The leg kicks were the big strength Volkanovski had, and it's like I was one of the few people who gave Volkanovski a chance going into that first fight. Like it's on the 245 preview show. Like I even made the prediction and said Volkanovski's going to win this fight. And you saw him working those kicks, and you were sort of like, God, it's so obvious now. Why didn't anyone think of this before? And it was a great performance. Volkanovski was, in my opinion, you can make arguments over whether or not Max won the second fight. I don't think you can with the first. That's a clear 49-46 for me.
Absolutely. I personally score Alex for the second fight. I think it's close. Me and my best friend argue back and forth. In fact, he'll probably watch this preview and give me hell for it.
You watched it 49 times?
No. I mean, I haven't watched it that much. I've actually watched it probably like 3 or 4 times. But he scores it for Max. My best friend does, and I score it for Alex. And we always still go back and forth on it, just arguing over it. He's going to watch the preview show and give me a little bit of hell for it, saying I still think Alex won.
Let's talk about Max Holloway a little bit here. So 23-6 record, pretty much already booked his place in the UFC Hall of Fame because of the wins on his record. Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Frankie Edgar, Brian Ortega, 2 wins over Jose Aldo, Anthony Pettis, Ricardo Lamas, Jeremy Stevens, Charles Oliveira again, poor guy. It just goes to show how much his career has turned around. So all credit to you, Charles. Never been dropped in the UFC, only ever been finished once, which was back in 2012 against Dustin Poirier. His most recent fight, he took on Yair Rodriguez, which was a pretty close decision between the two fighters. Was that Max performing at a lower level, or was that people underestimating Yair?
I think it's a mix of Yair being underestimated, me included, and I think also stylistically it was an awkward one for him. I think he still struggles with kick heavy game plans.
And it got to the extent that Max Holloway was having to use something which we haven't seen from him all that often, which was a very grappling heavy game.
Yeah, it was crazy seeing it. He started taking him down, started working his jiu-jitsu, working his ground and pound. It was awesome. I mean, that fight's great. So
yeah,
but it was cool.
So we've talked about what Alex Volkanovski has done to get the better of Max Holloway. And you mentioned some of the improvements that Max made in the second fight. What other weaknesses does he need to close up to just do enough to get this win?
I think he needs to focus on, because the body style is different. I don't think some of the kicking problems that Yair gave him are applicable in this fight. I think for Max, though, at range, you have to be ready for the low kicks, whether they be inside calf kicks or outside calf kicks from either stance. I think you have to be ready for that at the open distance, when they're just kind of circling or waiting in the center, looking for opportunities. I think that's the only one I can think of. Other than that, obviously the basics of don't let this guy switch stances on you when he's coming in, making his movement. You might want to take momentum, or not take momentum. I think you might want to give pressure. Would be the one thing I think he does. Whoever gives pressure in this fight seems to have the success. When Alex is pressuring with low kicks, he's winning. When Holloway's pressuring forward with his boxing and Muay Thai, he's winning.
Who do you think has the power advantage between the two? Because
Volkanovski.
Answer my question for me there. Because I was going to say that, like, we have seen Alex recently, especially when he fought Korean Zombie, we have seen him starting to load up on his shots a little bit more, become that sort of brawler that a lot of people stereotype him as. But Max Holloway did drop Volkanovski twice in that second fight, so gotta bear that into mind.
That is a good, yeah. I still lean Volk. Maybe I should have hesitated, but I was more so thinking of the poundings he gave Ortega and Korean Zombie. Like, they didn't seem to have that one shot power, but they did seem like sledgehammers somehow. It was odd.
I've picked Volkanovski both times these two have fought, and I'm not going to change my mind. I think Volkanovski's going to win this one, and it's going to be another decision.
I picked Volk in the second fight, and I gave him a better chance in the first fight, but I didn't pick him. But I'm picking Volk here. Yeah. I think he's the number one pound for pound guy on the planet. And poor Max. I love Max Holloway, big Max Holloway fan. Big fan of both of them, but someone's got to lose.